Every dawn, a poor servant woke to the same mystery. Her only pair of boots vanished without a trace. And every morning, a strange white wolf pup returned them as if it were playing a secret game. Lyra thought it was harmless. She thought it was random. She thought no one in the fortress even knew her name. But what she didn't know was far more dangerous. The white wolf wasn't acting on instinct. It was following orders. Orders given by the most feared Alpha King in the north. A king who watched her from the shadows. A king who never noticed anyone. A king who had been secretly arranging every encounter long before she ever looked up and met his eyes. And when Lyra risked everything to protect a chained child from being sold into slavery, she unknowingly awakened something inside the cold-hearted ruler that had been buried for years. Now the fortress is changing. The council is plotting. Enemies are watching. And a secret that began with a stolen pair of boots is about to shake an entire kingdom. Because the Alpha King never intended to fall for a servant. Yet somehow, she became the one person he could no longer stay away from. The northern pack fortress never truly felt alive. It only breathed in cold, heavy silence, as if the mountain itself had learned how to hold secrets. Stone corridors stretched like endless tunnels of gray memory, and even the wind outside sounded like it was trying not to be heard. Torches flickered weakly along the walls, their light swallowed by the vast emptiness of early dawn. Before the sun could rise, Lyra was already awake. She always woke before the world remembered her. Her hands moved automatically, pulling a worn shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stepped into the frozen hallway. The floor beneath her boots was so cold it felt like it had never known warmth. Every step she took echoed softly, but not softly enough to avoid attention if someone truly wanted to hear her. That was why she walked carefully. Not because she was afraid of noise, but because she had learned that silence was survival. She carried a wooden bucket in one hand, the water inside trembling slightly with each step. The other hand held a folded cloth, rough from too many washes. Her breath turned into thin mist in front of her face and disappeared just as quickly, as if even her warmth was not allowed to stay. Lyra was not important here. Everyone knew that. Servants like her were background pieces in the fortress, things that existed only to make sure more important lives ran smoothly. No one asked where she came from. No one cared where she would go. She had learned not to expect questions. Expecting anything more only made the silence heavier. Still, she had something that kept her going. A single pair of boots. Worn. Stitched so many times that the original leather was almost a memory. They were not beautiful. They were not strong. But they were hers. The last thing her mother had left behind before everything collapsed into the life she now lived. Lyra stopped near the storage corridor where she always left them at night. Her eyes lowered slowly. The space where her boots should have been was bare again. For a moment she did not move. She had learned not to react too quickly to loss. Reaction made things real. And reality in this fortress was rarely kind. She exhaled softly, almost like she was letting go of a thought before it became pain. Then she checked behind the wooden barrels stacked against the wall. Nothing. She stepped closer, crouching near a broken crate. Nothing again. A faint tension gathered in her fingers, not anger exactly, but familiarity. This had happened before. Too many times for it to feel like coincidence, but too strange to feel like theft. Behind her something shifted. Soft sound. Like delicate. A paw stepped onto stone. Then another. Lyra turned slowly. From the shadow of the stairwell, a small white wolf pup appeared. Its fur looked almost too clean against the dark stone. Its eyes were bright, alert, and disturbingly intelligent for something so young. It did not behave like a frightened animal. It behaved like something that understood timing. And beside it, carefully placed as if presented with pride, were her boots. Again. Lyra stared at them for a long moment without speaking. The pup sat down calmly, tail flicking once against the ground. It watched her reaction closely, as if waiting for approval or disappointment, as if both mattered equally to it. Lyra finally broke the silence. You again, she said quietly. The pup tilted its head slightly. No fear. No guilt. Only attention. Lyra stepped forward and picked up her boots. They were slightly warm, which made no sense in the freezing corridor. She frowned faintly, running her thumb along the edge. You know I need these, she murmured. The pup blinked once. Then, as if the conversation had ended properly, it stood up. It turned and walked away. Not rushing. Not hiding. Just leaving as if its task had been completed exactly as intended. Lyra watched it disappear around the corner. A strange feeling settled in her chest, something between confusion and reluctant familiarity. She had no explanation for it. She also had no energy to chase mysteries that did not feed her or protect her. So she simply put her boots on and continued her morning. The fortress was waking now. Voices echoed faintly in distant halls. Metal clinked. Doors opened. Life returned in controlled, structured bursts. But something about today felt different. Lyra noticed it before she saw it. The air outside the corridor felt heavier. Colder in a way that was not weather. When she stepped into the courtyard, she understood why. People were gathered. Not casually. Not peacefully. Chains dragged across stone. Guards stood in formation. And in the center, a line of prisoners was being forced forward. Villagers. Ruptured. Exhausted. Their bodies carried the marks of travel, restraint, and fear. A slave trader stood proudly at the front, speaking like a man presenting goods in a marketplace. These are strong laborers, he announced. Fit for mining, construction, or sale to neighboring lands. Council members stood nearby, watching with detached interest. Some nodded. Some whispered. None looked troubled enough. Lyra stopped walking. Something inside her tightened. Among the prisoners she saw a child. Fragile. Barely holding herself upright. Her wrists were bound in chains too large for her thin arms. Every time she trembled, the metal made a soft sound that seemed too loud for something so small. Lyra felt her breath slow. The world around her faded slightly. She did not think. She moved. Step by step she walked closer to the line. A guard noticed her immediately. "Servant," he warned. "Step back." Lyra did not stop. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread she had saved from the night before. It was not much. Barely enough to matter. But it was everything she had in that moment. She knelt down near the edge of the prisoners. The courtyard went quiet. That kind of silence that feels like something is about to break. She placed the bread gently near the child and set a small water flask beside it. The girl looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. Lyra spoke softly, almost barely audible. "Eat. Slowly. You're safe for a moment." The child hesitated. Fear had been trained into her. Even kindness looked suspicious. But hunger won slowly. She reached out and took the bread with shaking hands. Lyra did not smile. She did not rush her. She simply stayed there, steady like a small shield against a world that did not care. Behind them, voices began to rise. "This is interference," a council member said sharply. The slave trader scoffed. "Punish her if needed. But do not delay my business." Lyra stood up slowly. Her heart was beating faster now, but her voice did not show it. "I'm not interfering," she said. The courtyard stilled again. "I'm just reminding you," she continued quietly, "that they are not things." A guard stepped forward, anger tightening his face. "Servants do not speak." Lyra met his eyes. And did not move. For a moment it looked like she might be punished right there. But then something changed. Not in the crowd. Not in the guards. But above them. High on the stone balcony carved into the fortress wall, a figure stood still. Alpha King Kaelen. He had been watching without interruption. Not the traitor. Not the prisoners. Or the servant kneeling in the snow beside a frightened child. His expression did not shift outwardly. He did not react like others might expect. But something in his gaze held longer than it should have. Too long. as if something inside him had quietly recognized a shape it had not seen in years. Lyra did not notice him. She only adjusted the child's sleeve gently, brushing off snow with careful hands. But Kaelen continued to watch. Unmoving, silent, and for the first time in a very long time, something in him did not turn away. The fortress felt different when seen from above. Not louder, not brighter, just emptier in a more honest way. From the highest balcony carved into the mountain stone, Alpha King Kaelen stood still as the wind moved past him like it was afraid to touch him directly. Snow drifted across the courtyard below in slow, uneven patterns, as if even the weather hesitated in his presence. No one dared stand beside him unless summoned. That was how it had always been, and Kaelen preferred it that way. Silence obeyed him. People rarely did. But today silence did not feel clean. It felt interrupted. His gaze remained fixed on the courtyard below. Her, the servant, still kneeling beside the child, still speaking softly as if the world had not trained her out of kindness yet. Kaelen did not move. Not even when the council behind him shifted uneasily. Not even when the wind pulled at his dark cloak. He simply watched. And something inside him that had been quiet for years shifted slightly. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough to disturb the stillness he had built his life upon. Behind him, voices spoke carefully. Your Majesty, the servant is interfering with approved trade proceedings. Another voice followed quickly. We can correct her behavior immediately if you wish. Kaelen did not respond at first. His eyes remained on Lyra, on the way she placed her body between fear and cruelty without hesitation, on the way she spoke to someone she did not know as if the child mattered more than consequences. That part lingered. Finally Kaelen spoke. Leave it. 2 words. Final. The council members went quiet instantly. Because when Kaelen spoke like that, there was no discussion left to be had. But even as the officials lowered their heads, confusion flickered in their expressions. This was not typical. Kaelen did not usually acknowledge servants unless discipline was required. And yet, he had chosen to watch this one. Below, Lyra stood again. The child clung to her sleeve like she was the only stable thing in the courtyard. Kaelen noticed that too. The way the girl did not look at anyone else. Only her. Something unfamiliar pressed lightly against his chest. He ignored it. He had learned how to ignore things that did not belong. Or at least, he used to be able to. Now it was harder. A soft movement beside him broke the stillness. The wolf pup. It sat near his feet, watching the courtyard with the same focus as its master. Its white fur stood out sharply against the dark stone floor. Intelligent eyes tracked Lyra without blinking. Kaelen glanced down at it briefly. You've been watching her, he said quietly. The pup tilted its head. Not guilty, not defensive, just aware. Kaelen exhaled slowly. I did not ask you to observe her for your own curiosity, he said. The pup remained still. But Kaelen knew the truth was more complicated. Ash had not been trained accidentally. Every movement, every theft, every morning disappearance of those boots had been intentional, carefully designed by him. A memory flickered. Lyra walking through the corridors, boots gone, finding them again. Her confusion, her soft frustration, the way she never truly became angry. Kaelen's jaw tightened slightly. It was not supposed to matter. It was supposed to be simple. Pattern. Controlled variable. A way to ensure she crossed certain paths at certain times. That was all. At least, that was what he told himself. Below, the courtyard shifted. The slave trader raised his voice again, demanding continuation of the transaction. Council members murmured approval. The world tried to resume its normal cruelty. But Kaelen's attention did not fully return to them. Stayed on Lyra. On the way she did not back down even when guards moved closer. On the way she stood there alone, small against an entire system built to silence people like her. Something in him resisted the idea of her being removed. That thought irritated him. He did not protect people. He governed them. There was a difference. At least there had always been. "Your Majesty," one of the advisors said cautiously behind him, "should we remove the servant from the courtyard? She is creating instability." Kaelen's voice was quieter than before. "No, Oz." Then he added, colder, "She stays." The advisor hesitated. "May I ask why?" Kaelen turned his head slightly. "Just enough. Not fully." The advisor stopped speaking immediately. No one questioned further after that. Silence returned. But it was no longer comfortable. Kaelen's gaze drifted again to Lyra. She was speaking softly to the child now, adjusting the water flask closer. Simple action. Almost meaningless. And yet, the way she did it felt like something he had not seen in years. Not obedience. Not fear. Real care. Uncalculated. Untrained. Unknown. That word lingered in his mind longer than it should have. Unknown. A faint memory surfaced again. Not sharp. Not complete. Just a feeling. A place he could not fully reach anymore. Someone laughing softly in a distant version of time. Someone who once looked at the world the same way Lyra was looking at that child. Kaelen's fingers tightened slightly against the stone railing. The memory slipped away before he could hold it. As it always did. Below, Lyra finally stood again. She did not know she was being watched. Not like this. Not like something shifting inside a man who had stopped shifting years ago. She simply stood between the child and the world. And the world hesitated. Kaelen noticed that too. Not because she demanded attention, but because she did not. Yet it came anyway. A guard stepped forward below. Tension rose again in the courtyard. Kaelen felt the shift before it fully formed. He knew what would happen next. Punishment. Silencing. Restoration of order. That was how it always went. That was how it was supposed to go. But something inside him resisted the finality of that pattern. Not loudly. Not rebelliously. Just enough to exist. The slave trader was speaking again. The council was agreeing again. The world was trying to settle back into its shape. And Kaelen stood above it all, watching one servant who refused to behave like she belonged in that shape. His voice came out before he fully decided it should. "Enough." One word. The courtyard froze. Every head turned upward instantly. Even the wind seemed to pause. Kaelen did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Remove the chains from the child," he ordered. Silence deepened. Shock spread below like fire under ice. Council members exchanged alarmed glances. One of them stepped forward quickly. "Your Majesty, the transaction is lawful." Kaelen looked down at him. Just a glance. The man stopped speaking mid-sentence. Kaelen's voice remained calm. "Remove them." No anger. No explanation. Just finality. Below, guards obeyed instantly. Metal clattered against stone. Chains fell. The sound echoed across the courtyard like something breaking permanently. Lyra did not move for a moment. Neither did the child. Then the girl collapsed into her arms, shaking. Lyra held her tightly without hesitation, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Kaelen watched that too. The way she did not hesitate to hold something broken. The way she did not step away from it. Something unfamiliar tightened again inside him. Not pain. Not comfort. Something in between. Something he did not have a name for anymore. The child clung to Lyra desperately now. And slowly, Lyra lifted her head. Her eyes moved upward. Not searching. Not expecting. Just instinct. And for the first time, her gaze met his. Kaelen did not look away. Neither did she. For a moment too long, the world held still between them. She did not bow immediately. She did not break instantly. She simply looked at him, as if trying to understand something she was not supposed to see. Kaelen felt that look reach deeper than it should have. Too deep. And for reasons he could not explain. He did not end the moment. Not yet. The courtyard had not settled. Even after the chains fell. Even after the guards stepped back. Even after Kaelen's command still echoed faintly in the stone like something unwilling to disappear. The air remained tense, thick with something unspoken, something fragile. Lyra still knelt in the snow. The child clung to her like she was the only solid thing left in a world that had already proven it could break at any moment. And Lyra, she did not push her away. She held her carefully, like something precious, like something easily lost. Above them, the fortress felt like it was holding its breath. The slave trader recovered first. Men like him always did. His smile returned slowly, practiced, controlled. "This is an unnecessary interruption," he said loudly, stepping forward. "These captives were acquired legally under border agreement." His voice was sharp, but there was something else under it now. Annoyance and fear. Because Kaelen had spoken. And when Kaelen spoke, laws did not feel as stable as they used to. Council members shifted uneasily. One of them stepped forward, bowing slightly toward the balcony. "Your Majesty," he began carefully, "while we respect your authority, this matter concerns territorial trade law. The removal of property." Kaelen did not move. He did not even look at the man properly. "Property," he repeated quietly. Just that one word. And somehow it felt heavier than any shout. Pause followed. Then Kaelen's voice came again. "Remove the chains." Not a request. Not a debate. A command that ended arguments before they fully formed. Below, guards obeyed immediately. But the trader's face tightened. "This is an insult to the agreement," he snapped. "There will be consequences." Kaelen finally looked at him. Only for a moment. It was enough. The trader stopped speaking mid-breath. Silence swallowed the courtyard again. Lyra didn't notice most of this. Her focus was on the child. The girl's fingers were shaking violently now, clutching Lyra's sleeve like she was afraid even the ground might disappear. "It's okay," Lyra whispered gently. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you." The words were simple, but they came from a place that did not feel simple. The child did not answer. She just nodded faintly, like she didn't fully believe safety was something permanent. Only temporary. Only borrowed. A guard stepped forward again, uncertain. "What are your orders regarding the remaining captives?" The question was directed upward. "Kaelen." The entire courtyard waited. Even the slave trader straightened slightly, expecting correction, expecting order to return. Kaelen's gaze remained on Lyra for a brief moment longer than necessary. Then he spoke. "Release them," he said. All of them." The courtyard broke. Not physically, but emotionally. Whispers spread instantly. Disbelief. Anger. Confusion. Council members turned toward each other, speaking quickly. "This violates the treaty. This will weaken trade relations. This is not protocol." But Kaelen did not respond to any of it. His authority was not something that needed defense. Simply existed. Lyra finally looked up again. Not fully understanding what had just happened, but sensing its weight. The child in her arms slowly loosened her grip, as if realizing no one was pulling her away anymore. For the first time, she didn't resist. Then something happened. Almost unnoticed. A guard approached the captives and began unlocking another chain. One prisoner looked up in disbelief. Then another. And another. The reality began to spread through them slowly. They were not being sold. They were being released. One by one. Chains fell. Metal struck stone. Each sound echoed like a sentence being rewritten. Lyra stood carefully, still holding the child's hand. She didn't understand the full political weight of what was happening, but she understood enough. This was not normal. Nothing about this was normal. She looked upward again, toward the balcony, toward him. "Kaelen." Their eyes met again briefly, but this time it felt different. Not accidental, not fleeting. Something had changed between that first glance and this one. Something neither of them had named. Kaelen's expression remained controlled. But inside him, something restless lingered. The way she held the child. The way she did not hesitate. The way she did not celebrate his command, nor fear it. She simply existed in it. Unchanged. Unimpressed. Present. That unsettled him more than defiance would have. The slave trader stepped forward again. His voice sharper now. This is unlawful interference. I demand compensation. He did not finish. Kaelen raised one hand slightly. The courtyard went silent instantly. Even the trader stopped mid-sentence. Kaelen's voice was calm. Leave. One word. The trader froze. Then slowly stepped back. Not because he agreed. Because he understood survival better than pride. The captives were guided out. Some walked uncertainly. Some collapsed in relief. Some looked around as if waiting for the illusion to break. But it did not. Lyra stayed beside the child until the last chains were gone. Only then did she finally exhale. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding. When she looked down again, the child had stopped trembling. Not completely, but enough to notice the change. That's it, Lyra whispered softly. You're free now. The girl looked at her, then slowly clung tighter. Not out of fear anymore. Out of trust. A moment passed. Then Lyra felt it. Eyes on her again. She looked up instinctively. Kaelen was still watching. But now, something in his gaze had shifted. Not softer. Not warmer. But heavier. Like recognition without understanding. Like a question he had not formed into words yet. Lyra didn't look away this time. She didn't bow. She simply held the child's hand and stood in the snow, facing the most powerful man in the fortress without anything except silence between them. For a moment, neither moved. The wind passed through the courtyard, brushing against broken chains scattered on the ground. And in that silence, something unspoken began to exist. Not trust, not fear. Something in between. Something that neither of them had language for yet. Kaelen finally turned away. Slowly. As if ending something he didn't fully understand. But as he did, his voice carried down once more. Take the child to the inner quarters. Was. Then quieter. Ensure she is cared for. It was not a command to the court. It was directed at no one in particular. But somehow, it was obeyed anyway. Lyra tightened her hold on the child slightly. And for the first time since the morning began, the fortress did not feel like it was about to break, but like it had already changed. And no one yet knew what it would become next. The library was the first place in the fortress that did not feel like it was watching her. Felt quiet in a different way. Not the silence of punishment. Not the silence of authority. But the silence of things that had simply learned how to exist without asking for anything in return. Tall shelves stretched upward like ancient trees made of paper and ink. Dust floated slowly in the golden light that came through narrow high windows. The air smelled of old parchment, dried ink, and time that had never been interrupted. Lyra stood at the entrance for a moment before stepping inside. The child Mira held her hand tightly. Even after freedom, her fingers did not fully let go. Ash, the white wolf pup, followed behind them without hesitation, padding softly across the stone floor as if it belonged there more than anything else in the fortress. Lyra noticed that immediately. The pup did not behave like an animal that followed orders. It behaved like something that had chosen a path and refused to reconsider it. Mira looked around slowly, eyes wide. "It's big," she whispered. Lyra gave a faint, gentle smile. "Yes," she said softly. "But it's safe here." Mira did not answer, but she stayed close. Closer than before. That alone felt like progress. Lyra guided her deeper between the shelves, searching for something simple. Basic reading books. Something to teach letters. Something to rebuild what had been taken from her too early. Her fingers traced spines carefully, as if touching them too hard might wake something. Behind her she felt movement. She turned slightly, and stopped. Kaelen was there. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just present. Sitting alone at a long wooden table near the center of the library. as if he had always been there. As if he belonged there more than the throne room above ever could. Mira noticed him too and immediately tightened her grip on Lyra's sleeve. Lyra gently squeezed her hand back. "It's all right," she whispered. Kaelen did not look up immediately. He was reading something. Or pretending to. His posture was still, controlled but not relaxed. It was the kind of stillness that came from someone who never fully stopped being aware of everything around him. After a moment, he spoke without looking up. "You come here now." It was not a question. Lyra hesitated only briefly. "Yes," she replied. "For her." Kaelen finally looked up. His gaze moved to Mira first, then to Ash, then to Lyra. It paused on her a fraction longer than necessary. "Reading?" he asked. Lyra nodded slightly. "I want to teach her letters." A silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just a heavy with unspoken awareness. Then Kaelen said, "There are books in the lower section." Lyra glanced toward where he indicated. "I know," she said softly. "I was heading there." Another pause. Then Kaelen returned his attention to the page in front of him. But he did not continue reading. Not really. Days began to form patterns after that. The library became something between a refuge and an unspoken meeting place. Lyra would arrive in the mornings with Mira. Kaelen would already be there sometimes. Other times he would arrive later, quietly, as if the timing did not matter but still somehow always aligned. They did not speak constantly. Sometimes hours passed with only the sound of turning pages. Sometimes Mira fell asleep against Lyra's shoulder while Ash lay nearby, unusually calm for a wolf pup in a royal fortress. And Kaelen never once disturbed that peace. He simply observed it, as if learning something without acknowledging it. One afternoon, Lyra was reading aloud slowly to Mira, tracing letters with her finger on a worn page. "B," she said gently. "Like this." Mira repeated it softly. "B." Her voice was uncertain but improving. Ash lay curled beside them, head resting on its paws, eyes half closed. Kaelen sat nearby at a separate table. But his attention was not on his papers. It was on them. Lyra noticed it. She didn't comment. But she felt it. That quiet awareness that followed her more often than she expected. Later, when Mira fell asleep between books, Lyra carefully adjusted a blanket around her shoulders. She moved slowly so she wouldn't wake her. Kaelen spoke quietly from across the room. "She sleeps easier here." Lyra looked up slightly. "Yes," she said. "She feels safe." Kaelen's gaze stayed on Mira, not moving. Then after a pause he said, "That is rare." Lyra didn't respond immediately, because she understood what he meant. Not just rare in general. Rare here. In this place. A soft sound interrupted the moment. Ash had stood up. The pup walked toward Lyra, nudging her hand gently before circling near Mira and lying down again, as if guarding her sleep was its assigned task. Lyra watched it quietly. "You trained it well," she said without thinking. Kaelen's eyes shifted slightly. "I trained it for awareness," he replied. "Was." Then, quieter than before. "It chooses what to do with it." That sentence lingered longer than it should have. Lyra looked at the pup again. It was not just following instinct. It was choosing proximity. Choosing protection. Choosing her. And that realization sat strangely in her chest. The sun shifted through the high windows, moving light slowly across the library floor. Dust floated in golden paths. Time felt less like control here, and more like something that simply passed. Lyra closed the book gently and leaned back against the shelf. Kaelen spoke again after a long silence. "You spend every day here now." Lyra nodded slightly. "For Mira," she said again. "Was." Then softer. "And because it is quiet." Kaelen did not respond immediately. But something in his gaze shifted. Almost imperceptibly. Like he understood that answer more than he wanted to. Mira stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring something unclear. Lyra adjusted the blanket again. Kaelen watched that simple action. Not the words. Not the book. Just her hands. Careful. Steady. Unafraid of gentleness in a place that rarely allowed it. Finally, Kaelen spoke in a lower voice. You are not afraid here. It was not a statement of fact. Sounded more like observation. Or confusion. Lyra looked at him directly for a moment. No, she said honestly. Not here. Silence followed. Longer this time. He did not ask why. But something in his expression suggested he already understood the shape of the answer. The library light began to fade slightly as clouds passed outside. The world beyond these walls continued its usual tension. Politics, power, rules. But inside this space, something else was forming. Not spoken, not named, just present. Like warmth that had not yet learned how to become fire. Kaelen closed the book in front of him. Not sharply, just gently, as if ending something internal rather than external. He stood slowly. Lyra watched without moving. He looked at her one more time before speaking. I will return tomorrow. It was not an invitation. It was not a command. Simply was. Lyra nodded. Yes, she said softly. Kaelen turned and walked away. His footsteps fading into the shelves. But the silence he left behind did not feel empty. Felt different. And Lyra could not explain why. The fortress no longer felt like a place that only held silence. Now it held tension. Not loud. Not visible at first glance. But present in everything. Like pressure building beneath stone before it cracks. Lyra felt it the moment she stepped out of the library that morning. The air was colder than usual. Or maybe it just felt heavier. Mira walked beside her, holding her hand tightly. Ash followed close behind, but even the wolf pup's usual calm energy felt slightly more alert today. Its ears kept twitching toward distant sounds in the fortress corridors. Lyra noticed that. She noticed everything more now. Because once a place starts changing around you, you either learn to see it or get swallowed by it. In the upper halls of the fortress, council chambers were already full. Voices overlapped behind thick wooden doors. Not shouting yet, but close to it. Controlled anger always came before open conflict here. Lyra passed quickly, keeping her head down. Servants were not meant to linger near those doors. But she still heard enough. Kaelen's decisions are destabilizing trade routes. He released captives without compensation. This is not how the Alpha line is supposed to rule. Then another voice, lower but sharper. And the servant girl Lyra, she is seen too often near him. That sentence made her steps slow slightly. Not stop. It was slow. Mira tugged her hand gently. And Lyra continued walking. But something uncomfortable settled in her chest. Inside the council chamber, Kaelen sat at the head of the long stone table. He did not look irritated. He did not look engaged either. He looked controlled. As if everything being said was already calculated in his mind before it was spoken aloud. But there was something new in the room today. Pressure. The elders were not just advising anymore. They were pushing. Your Majesty, one of them said carefully. Neighboring packs interpret your recent actions as weakness. Mercy is not stability. Kaelen's voice was calm. It is not weakness. Was. Then another council member leaned forward. Then explain the servant girl. The room shifted instantly. That name had weight now. Kaelen did not react immediately. But the air around him changed slightly. Not anger. Something quieter. Something more controlled than anger. Outside the chamber, Lyra had stopped again without realizing it. Mira looked up at her. Lyra. Lyra blinked and gently smiled. It's fine, she said softly. Let's go. But she already knew it wasn't fine. Not anymore. Rumors spread like they always did in places built on hierarchy. By midday, Lyra felt it in the way guards looked at her differently. Not openly hostile, but questioning, measuring, as if she had become something they had to classify. Servant, interference, or something worse. Something they did not yet have a word for. In the courtyard, nobles gathered in smaller groups, speaking quietly. Lyra passed them carrying water for Mira. She heard fragments. She spends too much time near the king. Strange behavior from the wolf pup. No proper background. Lyra kept walking. She had learned long ago not to respond to voices that wanted reaction more than truth. But still, stayed with her. Ash suddenly moved closer to Mira. The wolf pup positioned itself slightly between them and a passing group of guards. Lyra noticed immediately. "What is it?" she whispered. Ash didn't respond. Just stayed there. Watching. Alert. Protective in a way it had never shown before. Mira squeezed Lyra's hand tighter. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. Lyra hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. And that was what unsettled her most. Inside the council chamber, the tension finally sharpened. "We recommend a political alliance," one elder said firmly. "A marriage. Strengthen the throne through blood ties." A silence followed. Kaelen's voice. Cold. "Not required." The room stirred immediately. "This is tradition," another elder insisted. "The Alpha King must secure lineage and alliances." Kaelen's gaze did not rise. "Tradition does not govern survival." Then the earlier voice returned. "And the servant girl?" Question hung there. Heavy. Deliberate. Kaelen finally looked up. Slowly. Just slightly. "That is not part of this discussion." But it already was. Everyone knew it. That evening, Lyra was near the outer corridor when she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy. Guard steps. She stopped. 3 guards approached. Not aggressive. Not yet. But formal. "Lyra," one said. She turned slightly. "Yes. The council requests your presence for background verification." Mira stepped forward immediately. "No." Her small voice surprised even Lyra. The guards paused. Lyra gently placed a hand on Myra's shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered. But she did not feel okay. She followed them. Not resisting. Because resisting would only turn attention into punishment. The corridor felt longer than usual. Every step echoed differently. Ash followed silently. No one stopped it. No one dared. In a small chamber near the council wing, Lyra stood alone. The guards did not leave immediately. They watched. She understood that much. She was being assessed. Not for crime. But for presence. For proximity. For influence. One of the council elders entered. He did not sit. He looked at her like she was an equation he disliked solving. "You have no registered lineage," he said. Lyra remained calm. "I don't have one. You have no noble ties." "I don't. And yet," he continued, "you appear repeatedly near the Alpha King." Lyra didn't answer. Because there was no answer that would satisfy him. A long silence followed. Then the elder spoke again. "People begin to talk." Lyra finally responded. "I don't control what people say." "No," he agreed. "But the king does." That line landed differently. He stepped closer. "Be careful where you are seen." Lyra met his gaze. Not challenging. Not submissive. Just steady. "I am not trying to be seen," she said quietly. That was the truth. And somehow, it made the situation worse. When she left the chamber, Ash was waiting outside. Mira rushed to her immediately. Lyra knelt slightly and held her gently. "It's fine," she whispered again. But her voice was less certain now. 'Cause she could feel it. A shift. Something was moving around her that she could not see clearly yet. But it was already deciding her place in it. That night, in the highest chamber of the fortress, Kaelen stood alone again. Ash sat nearby. But even the pup was restless. Kaelen looked out toward the courtyard. Toward where Lyra had walked earlier. His voice was quiet. "They are noticing." Ash did not respond. Kaelen's eyes narrowed slightly. Not anger. Something closer to focus. Because for the first time in years, the fortress was not reacting to him. It was reacting to her. The storm did not arrive like a warning. It arrived like punishment. Snow fell harder than usual that night, swallowing the fortress walls in thick white silence. The wind moved through the corridors with a strange urgency, as if something outside had broken loose and the mountain itself was trying to hide it. But inside that silence, something had already gone wrong. Lyra felt it before anyone spoke. Mira was not in her room. The bed was empty. The blanket was thrown aside. And Ash was standing unusually still near the doorway. Too still. Watching. Waiting. Lyra's breath stopped for half a second. Then her mind caught up with reality. "Mira," she whispered. And that was enough to break everything. The fortress did not react immediately. That was the worst part. No alarms. No chaos. Just delay. As if even panic needed permission here. Lyra moved fast. Her footsteps echoed sharply down the corridor. "Mira," she called once. No answer. Only wind. Only silence. Only the feeling that something had been taken too quickly for her to stop. Ash ran ahead of her now. Not playful. Not curious. Focused. Guiding. By the time Lyra reached the outer gate, she already knew. There were footprints in the snow. Too many. Too organized. Not wolves. Not pack guards. Strangers. Her chest tightened instantly. "No," she whispered. Her fingers shook as she stepped closer. Small marks in the snow. Child-sized drag pattern. And then chains. Fresh. Cold. Used again. She didn't think. She moved. Into the storm. Into the forest beyond the fortress walls. Into the white darkness that swallowed sound. "Lyra!" A guard shouted behind her, but she didn't stop. Not this time. Not for permission. Not for rules. Not for anything. The forest was worse than the fortress. Felt alive in the wrong way. Branches bent under snow like broken bones. The wind cut through cloth like it was searching for skin beneath it. Every step was heavier than the last, but Lyra did not slow. Mira was out there. Somewhere. Scared. And that thought erased everything else. She stayed ahead. Always ahead. Leading her through paths she did not understand. Lyra followed blindly. Because trusting the pup now felt less dangerous than not trusting it. Far ahead, faint voices broke the storm. Laughing. Arguing. Lyra stopped instantly behind a tree. Her breath came sharp. She peeked through the snow-covered branches. And saw them. Slave traders. Again. Different group. Same cruelty. And in the center, Mira. Bound again. Carried like something that could be misplaced. Her small face was pale. Silent. Not crying. That was worse. Something inside Lyra snapped cleanly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. She stepped forward before she realized she was moving. But then, a shadow hit the snow behind her. Fast. Hard. A presence that made even the storm feel less chaotic. Kaelen. He arrived without announcement. Without guards. Without sound. Just there. His eyes locked instantly on the scene ahead. And something in his expression changed. Not anger. Something deeper. Something colder. Something dangerous. "Stay back," Lyra said immediately, turning slightly. But Kaelen did not listen. He stepped forward once. Then stopped beside her. The wind moved around them like it avoided touching him directly. "Who took her?" he asked quietly. Lyra didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. He already knew. A distant shout came from the traders. They noticed them now. Too late. One of them laughed nervously. Well, the Alpha King himself." Kaelen did not respond. He only looked at Mira. And the air changed instantly. Lyra moved first. "No, wait." But Kaelen was already gone. Not running. Moving. Like the storm itself had decided to take shape. The snow exploded around him as he crossed the distance. One trader reached for a weapon. He didn't finish the motion. Kaelen grabbed him and threw him into the snow without hesitation. No rage. No hesitation. Only certainty. Lyra ran after him now. Her heart pounding. She followed closely. The forest turned into chaos in seconds. Men shouting. Snow breaking, chains snapping. But through it all, Kaelen did not lose focus. His attention stayed on one thing. Child. Lyra was dropped onto the snow as confusion spread among the traders. One of them yelled, "Retreat!" But it was already too late. Kaelen stood between them and the child. Silent. Absolute. Lyra reached them just as another trader tried to move in from the side. She acted instinctively, pushing Lyra behind her. "Stay down," she said sharply. Lyra nodded quickly. For the first time, obeying without fear. The fight did not feel like a fight. Felt like an ending. Kaelen did not waste movement. Every step he took removed threat from existence. One trader fell. Then another. Not shown in brutality, but in inevitability. Like the forest itself was rejecting them. Lyra watched him for a moment. Not with fear. Not with shock. With something harder to define. Because this was not the same man from the council room. This was something older. Something protective in a way that had no softness left. Only purpose. When the last trader fled into the storm, silence returned again. But it was not peaceful. It was heavy, breathing, alive. Kaelen turned slowly toward Lyra. She was shaking. Lyra held her tightly. The king stepped closer. And for a moment he did not speak. He simply looked at the child. Then at Lyra. Something passed between those two looks. Something unspoken. Something that did not belong to politics anymore. The wind howled again. But Kaelen raised his hand slightly. And the guards arriving late from the fortress stopped instantly at the tree line. He did not even look at them. "Do not move," he ordered. They obeyed. Immediately, Lyra finally spoke. "She's safe." Kaelen nodded once. Yes, one word. But it carried weight. The journey back was silent. But different. Not empty. Changed. Ash walked close to Lyra now, as if refusing to leave her side. And Lyra noticed something strange. Kaelen stayed near them. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside. Back at the fortress, the courtyard was lit with fire pits. The traders' carts were dragged in. Broken. Destroyed. No negotiations. No trial. Just removal. Lyra stood with Lyra wrapped in her arms as Kaelen gave the final order. Burn them. The carts were set ablaze. Flames rose high into the snow-filled night. Orange against white. Light against cold. A symbol that felt heavier than justice. Felt like ending something that should never have existed. Lyra buried her face in Lyra's shoulder. Lyra held her tighter. And for the first time, she saw Kaelen differently. Not as a ruler. Not as a king. But as something dangerously human beneath all control. Someone who did not hesitate when it mattered. Someone who had already decided what could not be allowed to continue. Kaelen stood beside her now. Silent. Watching the fire. Snow falling around them. And in that moment, Lyra realized something she could not yet name. He wasn't just protecting the child. He was protecting her too. And that realization changed everything that came next. The fortress had returned to silence after the fire. But it was not the same silence anymore. No longer felt like control. Felt like aftermath. Like something had been broken too deeply to return to its original shape. Lyra noticed it the moment she walked through the corridor the next morning. Even the air felt different. Heavier in a way that had nothing to do with weather. Lyra was still asleep in the inner quarters, finally resting without fear for the first time in days. Ash lay curled near her bed, unusually still, like it had decided guarding her dreams was just as important as guarding her life. Lyra should have felt relief. But instead she felt something else. Quiet unease. Because something had not been explained. Something was still missing. Came in the smallest form first. Memory. The boots. Her boots. She had not seen them missing in days. Not since everything with Lyra. Not since Kaelen's intervention. Not since the fire. And yet, she could not forget how they used to disappear every morning. Always taken. Always returned. Always placed in strange places like they were being guided somewhere rather than stolen. Lyra stood near the corridor where it had all started. The same spot. Now. She frowned slightly. Why had it stopped? Ash appeared beside her quietly. Did not behave like before. No playful energy. No wandering. Just watching her. Too focused. Too aware. Lyra looked down at it. You know something, she whispered. The pup blinked slowly. Then turned its head slightly. As if telling her to follow. She didn't plan to follow. But she did. Because after everything that had happened, she had stopped trusting coincidences. The path led her deeper into the fortress. Not toward the courtyard. Not toward the library. But somewhere quieter. Older. Unused corridors where stone felt untouched for years. And there, door. Partially open. Lyra stopped. Her breath slowed. Something about it felt wrong. Or maybe, too intentional. He pushed it open. The room inside was dim. A storage chamber. Old equipment. Forgotten weapons. Dust-covered relics of wars no one spoke about anymore. But something in the center caught her attention immediately. Her boots. Placed neatly on a wooden bench. Not thrown. Not hidden. Not lost. Arranged. Like they had been waiting. Lyra froze. Then slowly stepped closer. Her heart tightened. No, she whispered. Because this was not the pup. This was not chance. This was deliberate. A sound behind her made her turn instantly. Kaelen stood at the entrance. Silent. As if he had been there the entire time. Lyra's voice came out sharper than she intended. You did this. He did not deny it. That silence was answer enough. Her grip tightened. The boots, the pup. Every morning. Kaelen stepped inside slowly. Yes. One word. No hesitation. No defense. Just truth. Lyra stared at him. Trying to understand what part of her life had been controlled without her knowing. Why? She asked. Her voice was quieter now. Not angry. Confused. Kaelen looked at the boots. Not at her. For a moment. Then back at her. I needed you to move through certain places, he said calmly. Lyra blinked. That's it. He paused. No. Silence stretched. The room felt smaller suddenly. Kaelen exhaled slowly. His voice lowered. When I saw you with the child in the courtyard, I did not understand why I kept watching you. Lyra didn't move. He continued. It was not strategy. Another pause. Not at first. Lyra felt something shift inside her chest. Kaelen's gaze hardened slightly. Not with anger, but with something more restrained. You did not behave like the others, he said. You did not hesitate. You did not calculate. And you did not fear the consequences of kindness. The room was completely still now. Even Ash did not move. Kaelen looked at her directly for the first time since speaking. So I created reasons. Lyra whispered. Reasons. His jaw tightened slightly. For you to be in places I could observe you. Silence. The boots were one of them. Lyra felt her breath catch. So it was not theft. Not randomness. It was design. Controlled encounters. Invisible influence. She stepped back slightly. You used me, she said quietly. Kaelen did not deny it immediately. That pause hurt more than words. Then he said, yes. Honesty without softness. Lyra's chest tightened. But something else followed that feeling. Something unexpected. Not just anger. Confusion layered over something deeper. Because his voice did not sound manipulative. Sounded restrained. Controlled. As if he was admitting something he had never planned to say out loud. Kaelen continued. When I saw you comfort Mira. He stopped for a moment. As if the memory was not easy. I remembered something I had lost. His eyes darkened slightly. Something I stopped believing still existed. Lyra watched him carefully now. Not interrupting. Not speaking. Just listening. Because something in his voice had changed. Less king. More man. Kaelen's gaze dropped briefly. I did not know how to approach that feeling. So I created structure around it. He looked at her again. The pup, the boots, the proximity. His voice lowered slightly. Excuses. The word stayed in the air longer than anything else. Excuses. Not manipulation. Not control. Excuses. That made it more complicated. Not less. Lyra looked down at the boots on the bench. Then back at him. And me? She asked quietly. Kaelen did not answer immediately. The silence stretched again. Longer this time. He finally said, I did not expect you to stay. That hit differently. Lyra's expression softened slightly without her realizing. You thought I would leave. Yes. Was. Everyone leaves. That sentence was quieter. Heavier. Not accusation. Experience. The room felt colder now. But not from the stone. From the truth being spoken too openly. Lyra stepped forward slightly. Then why not just ask me to stay? Kaelen looked at her. And for the first time, something in his expression broke just a little. I did not know how. Simple. Honest. Untrained. Silence returned again. But it was different now. Not tension. Exposure. Lyra finally exhaled slowly. Her voice softened. So instead, you stole my boots every morning. Kaelen didn't respond. Because there was nothing else to add. Outside, the wind moved through the fortress again. But inside this room, something had shifted permanently. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Not fully forgiving. Not fully angry. Just understanding something she hadn't before. That even kings do not always know how to reach what they want without breaking their own rules first. Kaelen finally spoke again, quieter. I did not intend to harm you. Lyra met his gaze. I know, she said softly. That was not forgiveness. But it was not rejection either. A long silence followed. Ash moved slightly closer to Lyra, as if sensing the emotional weight in the room. Kaelen looked at the boots once more. Then at her. I can stop, he said. Lyra hesitated. Because something about that question felt heavier than the confession. Stopping meant distance. Distance meant uncertainty again. After a long pause, she said quietly. Don't decide that alone. Kaelen's eyes shifted slightly. For the first time, uncertainty appeared there. Not weakness. Humanity. And in that moment, neither of them walked away. The library had changed again. Or maybe it was Lyra who had changed. She could no longer enter it without feeling the weight of everything that had been revealed in the last few days. The silence between books no longer felt harmless. Felt like it was listening. Mira sat at a long table, tracing letters slowly with her finger. Her concentration was serious now, as if learning had become something more important than play. Ash lay beside her feet, awake this time, watching the room with steady attention. Lyra stood near the shelves, but her mind was not on books. It kept returning to the storage room, to the boots, to Kaelen's voice. I created structure around it. Excuses. Not control. Not manipulation. Excuses. That word refused to leave her thoughts. She pulled a book from the lower shelf without really reading the title. It was old, heavy, and smelled of ink that had survived years of silence. Kaelen was already there. Course he was. Sitting near the window, as if the library belonged equally to him now. But today something was different. He wasn't reading. He was watching her. Not openly. Not intensely. Just present in a way that felt heavier than words. Lyra noticed immediately but said nothing. Mira noticed too, glancing between them with quiet curiosity before returning to her letters. Lyra opened the book. But the words blurred slightly. Not because she couldn't read them. Because her mind kept pulling her elsewhere. She turned a page. Another page. Then stopped. Inside the book were old records. Symbols. Like history. And something she didn't recognize at first. Mate bond references. She frowned slightly. Mate bonds were spoken of in whispers inside the fortress. Not denied. Not confirmed. Just avoided. Stories about instinct. about recognition, about bonds that formed without permission. She traced a line of text slowly. Unexplainable pull between marked souls. Lyra paused. Her fingers stopped. Something about that phrase felt familiar. Not in knowledge, in feeling. Across the table, Kaelen finally spoke. You found the old records. Lyra looked up slightly. Yes, she said. Her voice was calm but quieter than usual. Kaelen didn't move. Most avoid them. I noticed. Then Lyra added softly. Why? Kaelen looked away toward the window. For control, he said simply. Lyra didn't respond immediately. That answer made too much sense. And not enough. Mira suddenly looked up from her writing. Lyra, she said softly. This symbol is the same as the one near the pup's den. Lyra leaned closer. The child pointed. A marking in the book. Faint spiral-like symbol. Lyra's breath slowed slightly. She had seen that before. On the door of the storage room. Where the boots had been placed. Her heart tightened. She looked toward Kaelen instinctively. He did not deny it. That alone confirmed too much. Lyra turned the page slowly. More text. Older records. Stories that were not supposed to matter anymore. But they described patterns. Emotional alignment. Protective instincts between paired individuals. Calming of surrounding beasts. Unexplained familiarity without history. Lyra's eyes moved slowly over each line. And something inside her began to shift. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But steadily. Like pieces aligning without permission. Ash lifted its head suddenly. Its ears twitched. Then it stood. Walking toward Lyra. It pressed lightly against her leg. Then sat again. Not restless. Not playful. Focused. Lyra looked down at it. Then back at the book. Then back at Kaelen. A silence stretched. Mira noticed it too. What is it? She asked quietly. No one answered immediately. Kaelen finally spoke. You understand what you are reading. It was not a question. Lyra closed the book slightly. I think I am starting to. That was the truth. And it felt heavier than anything she had said before. Kaelen stood slowly. He walked a few steps toward the table. Not close enough to overwhelm. But close enough to be present. There are reasons these records were sealed, he said. Lyra looked at him directly now. Because they are dangerous. Kaelen shook his head slightly. Because they are inconvenient. That answer made silence deepen. Lyra looked back at the book. Then at Mira. Then at Ash. Then slowly back to Kaelen. You knew, she said quietly. Kaelen did not respond immediately. But his silence was enough. Mira shifted slightly. What does it mean? She asked softly. Lyra didn't answer right away. Because she wasn't sure how. But something in her chest already knew the direction of the truth. Kaelen finally spoke. It means, he said slowly, that what people think is coincidence is not always coincidence. It means recognition happens before understanding. Another pause. And sometimes before permission. Lyra felt her breath slow. The room suddenly felt smaller. Not dangerous, just focused. She looked at Ash again. The pup had not moved. But it was watching her differently now. Not as a companion. Not as a guard. But as something that already understood something she was still approaching. Lyra whispered without fully meaning to. Is that what this is? Silence followed. Kaelen didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said more than words. Mira tilted her head. I don't understand, she said quietly. Lyra gently closed the book. Then looked at her. You don't need to yet, she said softly. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if it was true. Kaelen finally spoke again. The council will not accept this. Lyra looked up. That shift in tone brought reality back into the room. Political reality. Not emotional. Not personal. Structural. They are preparing a vote, Kaelen continued. To enforce a political alliance. Lyra's expression changed slightly. With who? Kaelen didn't answer immediately. But his gaze said everything before his voice did. Lyra understood. And the understanding did not feel like surprise. Felt like arrival. Something that had been moving toward this moment from the beginning. Mira looked between them again. Are you both in trouble? She asked innocently. Lyra almost smiled. Almost. But it didn't reach her eyes. I don't know, she admitted. Kaelen's voice lowered slightly. It depends on what is chosen. Was law or something else. Silence returned. But it was no longer empty. It was full. Full of decisions not yet made. Full of truths not yet named. Full of something that was no longer just happening around them, but happening to them. Lyra looked down at the book one last time, then closed it gently. Not because she was done, but because she wasn't ready yet to read the rest. Kaelen watched her for a long moment, then spoke quietly. You should prepare. Lyra met his gaze. For what? Kaelen's answer came softly. For being seen. And for the first time, Lyra did not look away. The council chamber had never felt this cold. Not because of snow or stone, but because of the people inside it. Dozens of elders sat in a wide half-circle of carved obsidian seats, their eyes sharp, their voices already sharpened before speaking. The air carried old rules, older pride, and something more dangerous than both, fear of change. Lyra stood at the center. Not behind Kaelen. Not beside him. In front of him. That alone made several council members shift uncomfortably. Mira was not allowed inside. But her absence felt like a silent weight on Lyra's heart. Ash had been stopped at the entrance too. Only Kaelen stood just behind her. Unmoving. Like a wall that had decided to become a person. The High Elder struck his staff once. The sound echoed sharply. This council convenes under the law of blood and territory, he declared. His eyes moved to Kaelen. And under the concern that our Alpha King has allowed emotional interference to weaken the structure of this pack. A murmur spread instantly. Lyra felt it like pressure against her skin. Not fear exactly. Judgment. Another council member spoke. The Alpha King has rejected political alliance proposals, endangered trade stability, and allowed unauthorized influence inside royal quarters. Then his gaze shifted directly to Lyra. Influence that has no place in this chamber. Lyra felt her fingers tighten slightly, but she did not move. Kaelen had told her nothing before bringing her here. Only one sentence. You will be heard. That was all. No explanation. No protection offered. Just certainty. The High Elder leaned forward. Servant Lyra, he said sharply. You are not of noble blood. You are not pack-born of status. By what right do you stand here? The chamber waited. Silence stretched. Heavy. Intentional. Lyra inhaled slowly. She had been silent most of her life. Not by choice. By survival. But something in her chest had already changed before she entered this room. She stepped forward slightly. Not enough to challenge. But enough to be seen. I don't stand here by right, she said calmly. I stand here because I was brought here. But I am still here. A faint reaction moved through the chamber. Not approval. Not rejection. Surprise. The High Elder's expression hardened. Then speak quickly. Lyra turned slightly. Not toward the council. But toward Kaelen behind her. He did not nod. Did not signal. But his eyes told her something simple. Continue. She faced the council again. Her voice was steady. I am told I have no lineage that matters here. I agree. A few council members frowned. Lyra continued. But I have seen things your laws do not always protect. A ripple of discomfort moved through the chamber. I have seen a child chained and sold, she said quietly. I have seen fear treated as currency. And I have seen silence used as permission. Her voice did not rise. It didn't need to. She stepped forward again. One step. Not aggressive, but real. And I have seen what happens when someone chooses to stop that. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Kaelen, then back to the council. Kaelen remained still. But something in his expression shifted slightly. Not pride. Not approval. Something quieter. Recognition. A council elder interrupted sharply. This is not a place for emotional testimony. Lyra looked at him. I'm not speaking emotionally, she said. I'm speaking truthfully. And I think that's what makes you uncomfortable. Silence dropped instantly. He did not respond. Lyra turned slightly again. Her voice softened but grew stronger at the same time. I was not raised here. That is obvious. A faint breath moved through the chamber. But I understand something very simple. He paused. Power that does not protect is only decoration. The chamber reacted this time. Voices rose instantly. That is disrespect. Outrageous. Remove her. But the High Elder raised his staff again. Silence returned. Reluctantly, he looked at Kaelen. This is your servant. Kaelen finally spoke. His voice was calm. She is not my servant. The chamber froze slightly. Kaelen continued. She is here because I chose it. And because she chose not to run when she could have. Lyra felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear. Something deeper. The High Elder narrowed his eyes. Then explain your intentions, Alpha King. Kaelen looked at the council. Then at Lyra. Then back. My intention is simple. To rule a pack that does not destroy what it claims to protect. A murmur spread again. More unstable now. Another council member leaned forward. Then you accept the consequences of rejecting alliance. Kaelen did not hesitate. Yes. The chamber shifted. That answer was expected. But still shocking when spoken aloud. The High Elder's voice hardened. Then we proceed to vote. He raised his hand. All those in favor of enforcing the political marriage law and restricting independent council influence, raise your mark. One by one, hands began to rise. Not all, but enough. Too many. Lyra felt it. Pressure. The inevitability forming. But she did not step back. Not even slightly. Kaelen watched the chamber. Silent. Measured. Then slowly he spoke. I reject the vote. The room erupted instantly. That is not permitted. You cannot override council law. This is tyranny. But Kaelen did not react to any of it. He stepped forward. Just once. And the chamber quieted again. Not willingly. But instinctively. His voice lowered. Law exists to prevent collapse. Not to enforce blindness. He looked directly at the council. If your laws require destruction of what we just saved, he paused, then your laws are already broken. The chamber went still. Lyra looked at him now. Not as king. But as something else. Something choosing clarity over control. The High Elder's expression darkened. You risk destabilizing the entire pack structure. Kaelen replied calmly. Then the structure was already unstable. Silence stretched. Heavy. Final. Then something unexpected happened. A council elder slowly lowered his hand. Then another. Then another. Not all. But enough. The vote was collapsing. Not from force. But from hesitation. The High Elder realized it. His grip tightened on his staff. This is not over. Kaelen's voice remained steady. It is. And it will not be revisited. The chamber did not respond. Not because they agreed. But because they were uncertain. And uncertainty was more dangerous than anger. Kaelen turned slightly. His gaze fell on Lyra. For a moment. Only she saw it. Not authority. Not command. Just acknowledgement. Then he spoke again. This council will no longer determine personal bonds through political necessity. And no one will be forced into alliances they did not choose. That sentence settled differently. Heavier. More permanent. Lyra exhaled slowly. only now realizing she had been holding her breath. The High Elder struck his staff once more, but it sounded weaker this time. This council adjourns. His voice lacked certainty. As people began to rise slowly, the chamber losing its rigid structure, Lyra remained still for a moment longer, because she understood something clearly now. This was not just a political win. It was a fracture, a break in how things had always been. Kaelen stepped beside her quietly, for the first time in the chamber. Not behind, not above, beside. He spoke softly so only she could hear. This will not end cleanly. Lyra nodded slightly. I know, Oz. Then she added quietly. But it already ended differently than it began. Kaelen looked at her for a long moment. And for the first time, he did not look like a king making a decision. He looked like someone who had already made it. Dawn arrived quietly over the fortress. Not like a celebration. Not like an ending. But like something that had finally stopped resisting what it was becoming. The sky slowly shifted from deep gray to soft gold, brushing the mountain edges with light that felt warmer than it had in days. The snow outside no longer looked threatening. It looked still, peaceful, almost unfamiliar. Inside the inner quarters, Lyra woke slowly. For a moment, she did not remember everything that had changed. The council chamber, the vote, Kaelen's words, the silence that followed. And then it came back. All of it, not like a shock, like understanding settling into place. She sat up carefully. Mira was still asleep nearby, curled under a blanket. Ash lay at the foot of the bed, watching even in rest, as if it had learned that peace still needed guarding. Lyra exhaled softly. The fortress was quiet, but not the same quiet as before. This one felt lighter. She stood and moved toward the door slowly, and then stopped, 'cause something was wrong, or maybe something was right. Her boots, they were there. Exactly where she had left them the night before. Not hidden, not moved, not taken, just present. Lyra stared at them for a long moment, confused, then slowly bent down and touched them. Real. Still hers. But no longer part of a game she didn't understand. A soft sound came from behind her. He turned. Kaelen stood in the doorway. Not armored, not distant, just present. Ash immediately lifted its head but did not move. Mira stirred slightly but remained asleep. Lyra straightened slowly. You didn't take them, she said quietly. It was not a question. Kaelen shook his head once. No, Oz. His voice was lower than usual. I don't need to anymore. Silence followed. But it wasn't heavy. It was full. Full of everything that had been unsaid for too long. Lyra looked at him carefully. You used to. Kaelen didn't deny it. I did. Another pause. Because I did not know another way to reach you. Lyra's gaze softened slightly. But she didn't look away. And now? Kaelen stepped forward slowly. Just one step. Enough to close distance. Not enough to pressure. I don't need excuses anymore, he said. Oz. I need honesty. The words settled between them. Simple. Direct. More powerful than anything spoken in the council chamber. Mira stirred again. This time waking slightly. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. Lyra. Lyra turned immediately. Her expression softening completely. I'm here. Mira looked around slowly. Then smiled faintly when she saw Kaelen. Good morning, she said sleepily. Kaelen nodded slightly. Good morning. It was awkward, but not cold. Ash stood and stretched, then walked toward Mira, nudging her hand gently. Mira laughed softly for the first time in days. Real laugh. Mull. But alive. Lyra watched them. And something inside her loosened. Not fully, but enough. Kaelen spoke again. They are rebuilding the council structure today. Lyra looked at him. And he met her gaze. And nothing about you will be questioned again. Oz. You are not a topic of debate. That sentence landed deeply. Not as protection, but as recognition. Lyra stepped closer to the boots again. She picked them up slowly, held them in her hands, then looked at him. "So it's over," she said quietly. Kaelen shook his head slightly. "No, Oz. It's just no longer hidden." Silence stretched. But this one was different. Not uncertain. Not heavy. Just open. Mira slipped out of bed and walked toward Lyra. She hugged her without hesitation. Lyra knelt and held her gently. Longer than usual. Like something finally allowed to remain stable. Kaelen watched them. Not as a ruler. Not as an observer. But as someone who had finally stopped standing outside what mattered. After a moment Lyra stood again. Facing him fully now. "No more games," she said softly. Kaelen nodded. "No more games, Oz. And no more hiding." The words felt like closure to something that had begun in silence. Outside, sunlight spread fully across the fortress courtyard. Snow shimmered softly. The world no longer felt like it was holding its breath. Mira tugged Lyra's sleeve. "Are we staying here?" she asked quietly. Lyra looked at her. Then at Kaelen. A long pause followed. Not hesitation. Understanding. Then she nodded gently. "Yes." Kaelen didn't interrupt. But something in his eyes changed slightly. Not surprise. Relief. Lyra continued softly. "But not as servants." She looked at him directly. "Not as subjects." Kaelen met her gaze. Then said quietly. "No, Oz. As family." The word lingered. Not dramatic, but final in a different way. Ash moved closer to Lyra and Mira, sitting between them as if confirming the statement without words. Mira smiled and leaned into Lyra. Lyra gently placed a hand on her head. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was holding on to something temporary. Kaelen stepped closer again. This time, there was no distance left between what had been separate. He looked at Lyra for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "You changed what I thought this place could be." Lyra shook her head slightly. "I didn't change it, Oz. I just didn't let it stay the same." Silence followed, but it was peaceful now. Kaelen looked toward the open courtyard window. Sunlight flooded in, then back at her. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. Lyra gave a faint, soft smile. "Neither do I, Oz. But we can learn." That sentence didn't end anything. Started something else. Something slower. Something real. Outside, the fortress no longer felt like a place built on silence. Felt like a place beginning to breathe again. Lyra stood beside Kaelen now. Not behind him. Not under him. Beside him. And for the first time since everything began, nothing was missing. Not the boots. Not the child. Not the truth. Only time remained. And they finally had it.